How to go through death properly, helping yourself and departing loved ones. Similar questions have been asked and answered in previous Magic in Questions and Answers sessions. But I would like to return to the subject of leaving the physical plane, preparing for one's own departure and that of close relatives. What is the best way to organize this? Let me use myself and my grandmother as an example. My grandmother is not religious, she never goes to church, but she prefers to keep an icon in the house, as is customary. She never prays, but the icon is there. Recently, in the presence of my mother, I asked her how she would like to depart, because one way or another it will happen. I asked her, "How do you want it to be?" She said, "No priests, no memorial services. Don't hold any of those rituals in the church. Just bury me in an ordinary cemetery. But please, no priests, no funeral service, none of that." I think I'm ready to honor her wishes, but distant relatives, her sister and others, could theoretically arrange something themselves through the church. Would it still have any effect? Unfortunately, yes. That's why it's important to tell your relatives that this was her last wish and that they should treat it with respect. Just tell them, because sometimes people act without thinking, unaware that what they're doing is actually inappropriate. They believe they're doing a good thing. They simply need to be told that this good would in fact be harmful, because the last will of the deceased is sacred, in all times and in all cultures. And it's very commendable that you're asking these questions. They truly need to be asked, because we often feel uncomfortable or awkward discussing such matters. Why talk about it at all, as our culture tends to suggest? And then, as a result, we end up making unforgivable mistakes. And for those who have already left the physical plane, it becomes much more difficult to go without loss of rights. For example, it's generally accepted that if you depart from this world through the Christian channel, you leave everything behind. You also undergo a mandatory cleansing, a complete one. In other words, you let go of everything and reset your consciousness. And when, in your next life, you're uploaded with any existential volume and rights, it will always come through the Christian channel. What's more, you'll be indebted to it. In that life, you'll owe a debt to that channel. At least if you depart in a different way, there's a chance to keep everything for yourself in its original state. That is why the will of the deceased is law, and the other relatives must be properly informed that this was the deceased's last wish. What's unclear about that? If they go against it, they will only be doing harm to the deceased. They may think they're doing her good, but no, there will be no benefit, neither for her nor for them. She may even be wagging her finger at them from the other side. And how can this be done for oneself? If I were to pass away suddenly, what would be the best way to organize the people, the conscious ones like me, who are striving to reach the warrior caste? It's not magic yet, of course, but it's no longer Christianity. So what would be the best way to organize them? Perhaps it would be wise to ask in advance. Firstly, there must always be an executor of your will, someone who will carry out your last wishes unquestionably and reliably. Your departure from this world should be in accordance with the tradition to which you belong. So if it's the Norse Scandinavian tradition, then you must follow all the rules of that tradition. Fortunately, they're not secret. A warrior must leave with a weapon in his hand, that is, always with a ritual weapon. The question is, what is your weapon now? It doesn't have to be a sword. For example, my weapon is a pen, and that is how I'm going to depart, holding it in my hand. Some people, some gods who develop this tradition, say that there must also be a ritual wound on the body, a scratch, something of the sort. Blood has to be spilled. It must touch the earth. The earth must accept your right to pass. That kind of symbolism is embedded in the process. And then, of course, the next step is cremation, because, according to tradition, particularly the Norse tradition, it's not that burial pollutes the land, but that the warrior must go through fire. The warrior must pass through the fire channel. That's the rule. So, if this is something that concerns you, then you have to prepare for it in advance. I've already asked my family long ago. A good example of this are the Strugatsky brothers. They lived their entire lives under their own gods and never looked to anyone else. And before they died, they swore to one another that they would leave this world according to the rules they had created for themselves. They were both cremated, and their ashes scattered over the Pulkovo heights. That's how they resolved the matter, without publicly proclaiming their right to do so. Naturally, the entire Christian community gasped. How could they not? Of course they gasped, but there was nothing they could do because the will of the departing is law, and there was nothing to be done about it. So, simply choose someone you trust completely, someone you truly believe in, who, if they outlive you, will carry out your will, regardless of any opposition from relatives, friends, or other rigidly orthodox believers.